The Soviet Union, as we have known it for most of the 20th century, is breaking up now. He was a charismatic...
In 50 years, as an NBC News correspondent, I've reported on some of the most momentous events of our time.
So here we are in 1966. We got the Soviet Union dominating this part of the world. The West is dominated by the United States. China's kind of a blank spot. But the tectonic plates begin to move politically. And the world is a much different place now.
Tom Friedman, the Pulitzer Prize-winning foreign affairs columnist for the New York Times, and I have seen a lot of changes in the world.
I think so much of managing foreign policy today is actually about managing weakness. You know, if you think of Putin and Russia for a second, what's more dangerous? That Putin takes another bite out of somewhere in Eastern Europe, or that Putin collapses and spills onto the world stage nuclear scientists and nuclear weapons?
For Russia, then the Soviet Union, the changes began with this man, Mikhail Gorbachev, who took power in Moscow in 1984 and recognized the country had to change to survive. He was an articulate and charismatic figure, so different from the dark, dour men who had presided over what President Ronald Reagan called that evil empire. Gorbachev campaigned like an American politician, promoting perestroika, a new economy, and glasnost, a new openness.
I would like to give you an opportunity.
He even gave me an exclusive primetime interview in 1987.
Personal way.
I did the first interview with Gorbachev.
In the Kremlin?
I did it in the Kremlin. Everybody was trying for it. We got it.
I confronted him about a Cold War flashpoint.
You know how important symbols are in politics, Mr. General Secretary. There is no uglier symbol in the world of the division between East and West, of the division between your country and what the West stands for, than the Berlin Wall. Why don't you use your considerable influence with the East Germans just to have them take it down?
He was very self-confident and extremely Western-looking. And I thought, this is going to be a new day in Russia.
Former Secretary of State James Baker, who saw Gorbachev up close.
He changed the world. He absolutely changed the world fundamentally, and I would argue in a positive way.
As the Soviet regime began to come apart, there were rumblings in the other communist superpower. I first went to Beijing in 1975 with President Ford.
Tom Brokaw, NBC News at the Great Wall.
What was it like to be a newsman there then?
Well, it was hard because you'd ask people questions and they would say, I do this for my leader. And, you know, and we were very restricted on where we could go and how we could get there. And there was a little bit of a Cupid doll thing going on in this country. Oh my God, they're so fascinating. Look at those wonderful people, you know. But there was a reign of terror going on beneath all of that.
This is the overnight train from Beijing to Nanjing in the People's Republic of China.
In 1983, however, I took a journey by train across the country. I was able to report from places cameras had not been allowed.
The drive to control China's population is a national campaign, but it's carried out at the local level in places like this neighborhood committee headquarters, and boy, is it public. This bulletin board, for example, lists all the couples that had just one child during each of the respective months.
By 1989, China was changing, and Chinese students, encouraged by Gorbachev, demanded more freedom following the Russian leader's visit to Beijing.
Today we've received our first complete videotapes of the carnage, where Chinese turned on Chinese.
China's leaders unleashed the army on Tiananmen Square. I arrived as the government cracked down hard.
Once it blew up, we couldn't get anywhere in the square. So I had this great cameraman, and Tony said, chap, I think I've got a way of doing this.
Cameraman Tony Wasserman rigged a hidden camera on the back of his bike, and together we rode with the people of Beijing into the heart of the capital. We're now coming up on the Forbidden City, which has been reopened again for the first time in almost a month now. The Forbidden City, of course, is a symbol of China's past, and the tanks and the armored personnel carriers that are lined up here now are a symbol of China's present.
One Chinese understood what we were doing, rode up and tickled the lens on the camera, and we got the first footage out of there at that time.
Wow.
But I could have been shot, frankly.
Yeah.
By late 1989, the Soviet Empire began to collapse in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania. On November 9, 1989, the final piece. East Germany, the Berlin Wall. I was there reporting on unrest, not knowing the wall would come down. NBC News would have a worldwide exclusive. As they say, it was a night to remember.
Good evening, live from the Berlin Wall on the most historic night in this wall's history. What you see behind me is a celebration of this new policy announced today by the East German government that now, for the first time since the wall was erected in 1961, people will be able to move through freely.
Is there anything more exciting than watching people taste freedom for the first time?
No. Political tyrants can only go so far.
That's right.
But at the end, it's how people respond to their captivity and how they get out of it and how they relate to one another. And I think that is the enduring lesson of everything that I've ever seen in journalism.
On Christmas Day, 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. The Cold War was over, and historic events were taking place around the world.
Number one, you got to name one moment.
Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela, interesting.
Nelson Mandela because of what he'd been through.
Yeah. When did you encounter him first?
I went to the town square, and he stepped out as if he had just gotten back from a business trip in Zurich. Tall, elegant, articulate, beautiful man. Yeah. This crowd before him, and they'd all been denied fundamental rights simply because of the color of the skin.
Today, my return to Soweto fills my heart with joy.
The next day, I was in his garden in Soweto with him. He was so much at ease with us. He was so charismatic.
Let me just show you something here. This is something that has been greeting you wherever you go.
Yes, quite.
That's a television microphone. What did you think when you first saw it when you came out of prison?
Well, I thought it was a weapon. And I was very careful, you see. Every time you see it was moved towards me, I moved a little bit back, you see, to remain at a safe distance. I was seeing it for the first time.
Mandela and Gorbachev are the two guys that I think made a huge difference outside of America, taking on a big system.
Who was the worst?
Putin was one of the worst ones. I've interviewed him twice.
Is there an ideology at the heart of Vladimir Putin, or are you ultimately just a pragmatic man?
He'll go to his death as a KGB agent and as a Russian nationalist, come hell or high water, whatever it takes.
The next major international story may be bigger than any single world leader.
What do you think is the most undercovered story right now?
Well, I think the most divisive story in many ways, apart from how we put this country back together from a political and cultural point of view, is climate change. You've had regular coverage on nightly news. There still is a lot of resistance to the idea of climate change. I'm a believer.
And you can't separate it from politics either.
You can't separate it from politics. But around the globe, there is an enormous amount of evidence that this is happening, and it's likely to go on for a long time.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.